Bagram again, a new flashpoint and old headaches. Hello, you are watching the Global Eye with me, Masmi. US Donald Trump has publicly called for the United States to get back Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, arguing the facility is strategically vital because of its proximity to China, specifically to Western China. The Taliban and Afghan officials have responded with a swift, blunt rejection. No foreign troops, no bases. What looks like a throwaway line has the potential to ripple across South and Central Asia, forcing Washington, Kabul, and Beijing into a high stakes game of credibility, logistics, and geopolitics. Now, what was said? Trump's remark. At a public appearance, the president said the US is trying to regain control of Bagram Air Base and described it as strategically important because of its location near China. And let us see how Taliban or Afghan responded. Taliban spokespeople have and Afghan officials immediately dismissed any prospect of US forces returning, saying Afghanistan will not accept a foreign military presence and urging political and economic engagement instead. Now, why Bagram matters and why the comment landed so loudly? Bagram is not a dusty strip on a map. It's the massive airfield north of Kabul that anchored US operations for 2 decades. Its runway, logistic footprint, and location on the crossroads of South and Central Asia made it a key hub for airlift, surveillance, and force projection. In Trump's framing, Bagram's proximity to China gives it geopolitical value beyond Afghanistan's borders. The combination of symbolic and practical importance explains why his comment instantly migrates from political rhetoric to geostrategy. Feasibility, we need to look at the feasibility too. Can the US realistically get it back? Extremely difficult and politically explosive. Militarily, retaking and operating Bagram would not be a small surgical move. It would look like a large scale reinvasion requiring big troop numbers, secure supply lines, air defenses, and a long logistic tail. Politically, the Taliban have made the absence of foreign forces a cornerstone of their legitimacy. Allowing a return would undercut their domestic standing and is almost impossible to sell inside Afghanistan. And if you see the diplomatic context and the thin thread of engagement, despite the rhetoric, diplomatic channels remain open in narrow ways. US envoys and intermediaries have engaged the Taliban on detainees and consular concerns. These contacts show Washington still sees Afghanistan as a terrain of interest and problems, of course, that can't be ignored. But contact is not consent to bases. The Taliban have signaled they prefer economic and political ties without a military footprint. Regional reactions and risks are also there. China, Beijing has emphasized Afghan sovereignty and warned against destabilization. China will not welcome a US military foothold near its borders. Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Central Asian states, all of these actors will watch closely. Any renewed US military role in Afghanistan would trigger security recalculations and could accelerate competition for influence. We need to look at the cost versus benefits, the hard calculus, the potential benefits. And if you see Washington's logic, forward operating reach, surveillance capacity, and geopolitical signaling to rivals. Real cost or risk, heavy financial and human cost, insurgent attacks, diplomatic fallout with Kabul and neighbors, erosion of trust after the 2021 withdrawal, the possibility of Afghanistan becoming a renewed battleground for external powers. Many experts argue the marginal gain is outweighed by these risks. Now, Messaging and domestic politics. Trump's call to get Bagram back works as both geopolitical claim and domestic political signal, a theatrical reassertion of toughness and a critique of past withdrawals. It's politically potent because it simplifies a complex reality into a punchy slogan. But slogans don't build runways, alliances, or legitimacy. Trump, the formula seems timeless. Declare a strategic imperative, demand a quick fix, and leave the messy details for someone else to figure out. What could happen next? If you see the realistic scenarios. Diplomacy and limited engagement. Washington pursues talks with the Taliban on humanitarian and security issues, but no bases. Political signaling without boots. Continued statements to reassure allies and deter rivals, but posture adjusted elsewhere. Escalation spiral? Unlikely, but possible. An attempt to secure Bagram by force, risking backlash and insurgency. If we see the bottom line, what this moment tells us. Trump's Bagram comments have reopened an old argument. Is strategic presence the answer, or are political, economic, and diplomatic levers the only viable path? The Taliban's instant dismissal turned a rhetorical flourish into a real policy question, not just about bases, but about who gets to decide Afghanistan's future. For now, the more probable outcome is that this debate will intensify in policy circles. Loud words, few easy options. But let me ask, if the US could not secure Afghanistan after 2 decades, what would getting back Bagram achieve today? Would a renewed US presence strengthen regional stability or simply ignite another cycle of conflict? Can Washington afford the political and financial cost of re entering Afghanistan while also focusing on China, Ukraine, and the Middle East? How would China, Russia, and Iran respond if the US returned? And would Afghanistan once again become the arena of great power rivalry? Finally, is Trump's call a serious policy direction or simply a rhetorical shot fired for domestic applause? Think about it. For more updates and insights, keep watching The Global Eye.